And welcome everyone to the Tim and Jim Show. I'm Tim Sohn here in Pennsylvania, and I'm excited for this episode. I'm here with Sohn Social Media Solutions, and over to my good friend and trusty co-host, Jim Fuse. How's it going?
It's great to see you, Tim. Excited to be here. Jim Fuse of Fusion Marketing and Dealcasters on Amazon. And I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, where we're getting ready for a cold front to come through this weekend. I'm not real excited about that. We're going to have like the effects of a hurricane, I think tomorrow and Friday with some rain, and then Sunday, 31 degrees in the morning. So you talk about getting all four seasons in like a week. That's what's about to happen here. But I'm really excited about our guest today, JoAnn Krall, who I met on Twitter, I think is where we first met JoAnn, probably in a Twitter chat or something, I think. And it's just really interesting what she's doing. She is going to talk to us today about how to declutter and organize your business for less stress and more profit. And I think we could all use less stress and more profit. And thank goodness yesterday is over, which was election day, because I'm sure we're all tired of getting all that mail, which automatically goes into the shredder for me. So maybe I get a couple gold stars from JoAnn for getting rid of that stuff instead. So that's a little bit of decluttering. So get rid of all your election materials. But JoAnn, it's great to have you here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into this whole organizing thing?
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you having me. So what got me into it? Well, I always start out with, I was always organized until I wasn't. And I had a series of events in my life where, some were good and some were bad. I retired. I'm a former accountant, and I retired right after I had my first daughter many years ago. So, I started some home-based businesses. I actually was doing one first, then I had another daughter. And things start building up when you have kids, and all was good. But then I lost my parents within 2 weeks of each other. I was about 36 at that time, and just everything fell apart. And I decided to start another business to distract myself. So it was one day I was just sitting in my office. I had to get my daughters to swim practice in like 5 minutes, and my desk was a mess. I had work to do, dishes in the sink, laundry piling up, and I was freaking out. But I couldn't freak out because I had two very young daughters who I really didn't want them to see that. So, it was that day that I said, I really need to do something. And I started reading all the books on organizing, even though I was organized before. And I started, there wasn't really courses back then. They were more like ebooks and little like email programs. And I couldn't get it together. And so I just took a step back, and I thought about how I was organized in the past and why I couldn't be now, what was different. So I did some trial and error. And at that point I realized, you know what? Other people must be feeling this. So I just set out to do help some free clients, and never looked back. And that was about 16 years ago that I started.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And it is interesting how, life happens and we make changes, and in some cases it leads to a whole new path. And it's horrible, how you had to get started, but I think it probably helped you with your sanity, I could see as well. I know for me, a lot of the changes I went through, and I know Tim's gone through some different challenges as well, as Hurricane Florence pretty much wiped out my local business when I was in North Carolina as I was moving here. And Tim and I had just started the show. And once I got settled here, it was like, I really saw that, hey, I need to be using the internet more, right? Digital marketing, and started to reach out and have clients in more than just, right in your own backyard. And I think that made a big difference for me. Tim, what would you say is something that really made you make a big shift, kind of like JoAnn has done?
Yeah, so something in my life had happened right before I was going to do a 24-hour live stream fundraiser for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society in March. And so it just it gave me something to focus on. And there's so much that goes into a 24-hour live stream fundraiser, organizing something like that. So I just put all my energy into focusing on the event and making the event as great as it could be, and my condolences about your parents as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's been 20 years.
Wow.
Like this month. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So JoAnn, I mean, organizing, right? You're helping people. I think that's what we love to do as well. I think that's when you help people, I feel like your business will do better if you look at that first instead of the money. But we really want to learn about this organizing stuff. So Tim, you want to get us started with our first question?
I would love to. So JoAnn, why do businesses and people struggle with organizing?
That's the $1 million question. There's so many different reasons. Sometimes, a lot of, well, let's start with not everybody's born organized. Not everybody has the ability to just do it naturally. And then as we grow up, sometimes, it can go either way. We can have parents that are very organized and then can't understand why we're not. Or we have, parents that are disorganized and we're disorganized. So nobody's teaching us how to get organized or, keep things, not so much keep things clean and neat. It's about knowing where everything is. And so that's a big piece of it is, some people are just not born organized, or they're just not taught the proper way to be organized. Because, if you think back to school, we're taught one way to study, one way to, keep our desks neat, one way to organize. With my girls, we never had that. I swear there's more paper now than when we were little. But, my kids, they were told to use binders and you have to keep everything in the binders. That didn't work for my girls. And I said that to the teachers. I'm like, they're not going to have binders. They're going to have little booklets that, this is going to work for them. And so it's about knowing, so if we're taught one way, but it's not the way for us, then we fail. And then we try the next thing and then we fail. And then it starts to become a vicious cycle. We're like, well, we're never going to be organized. It's just not going to happen. So it's really about finding what works for us. And I talked about that before. So I was an accountant. I was very organized. I worked in an office. My desk was immaculate. My files were immaculate. But, coming to working in the home is a completely different situation, but then also adding on all the different things. And, I talked about, having kids and losing my parents, but then there's other people who have illness or chronic illness, chronic pain, and they just can't keep up with it. And then we can go towards like ADHD, a lot of people, I think a lot of us have it on some level, but then, adding, people who truly struggle with it. And then there's OCD, and I always get asked, you must be so OCD, and I'm like, that's not the proper way. I do have actual OCD, but it has nothing to do with organizing. It's about fire. So for me, but OCD isn't about wanting things neat and clean, unless of course you need things lined up because you think, the house is going to burn down because your shoes aren't lined up. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what OCD happens. So there are people that will have OCD. And so then that can't even, they need to get that under control before they can even start to organize.
Wow. And you'll probably get a laugh out of this. So when I was in the military, we would have lots of papers and I would have stuff all over my desk, but it was like, I knew where everything was and I'd say, don't touch my desk, because I knew exactly where I had put things. And it'd be like, well, why don't you just put it in a folder in your desk? It's like, well, I don't know. It worked for me at the time. But then you see these other people that have these amazing filing systems. You're like, oh, well, why can't I do that?
Well, yeah. And that's a big thing I always tell people, so I always use my husband and I as an example. My husband is the one with the immaculate filing systems. I have immaculate filing systems, but they're not always being utilized. He grabs a piece of paper. If he was to pay the bills, he would pay the bill and he would file it. I don't do that. I'm like you. I like piles. I need to be able to see it. So I'm more of a messy, organized person. I know where everything is. And, that just works for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've worked with many people who, I would go into their office and be like, okay, I need this report, and they can't find it, but their desk is perfectly clean. And then there's that other person, you see there's like piles and piles, and you're like, do you have that report from like last July? And they, yep, right here. And they pull it right out. So yeah, it's not all about looking great.
Tim, which one are you?
Well, I remember when this was like right after college, I was working at a newspaper. And one of the things was we got press releases, and this was earlier on in technology and everything. So we actually had to print press releases. So I would have these stacks of press releases on the desk, and I would know where they all were. But if you looked at my desk, you would think that I wouldn't know where anything was. And still, if you looked at my desk, you probably wouldn't think I would know where anything is. But I do know where it is. It's just not extremely clean.
Yeah. So let us know in the comments, messy desk or clean desk. I'm curious to.
A big piece of that too is some people, when they're faced with a blank desk, they're paralyzed. They kind of need their stuff around them to get them to be, inspired and moving and working. So it's all different. Different types.
Do you think it provides some comfort to people?
Some people, yeah, and that and that can go to the extreme. If you've ever watched Hoarders, when people start to get to the point where they have mental illness around their gathering and stuff, that mess gives them comfort. And when they go in and wipe out all the stuff, they don't know what to do, and then it all starts to build back up again.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it's funny. My wife loves recipes, and she like tears them out of magazine, or will print them off of Pinterest as opposed to just save it. And we now have like a cabinet that's probably about 4 feet high with like 4 rows of drawers, and she's put them all in all these drawers. And I say, and this is right, maybe goes to your point. I'm like, why don't you just scan them all, and then you can organize them, and you can just look them up on your phone or tablet or whatever. And she wants that piece of paper.
Yeah. Being able to touch it, that definitely. I know a lot of people like that. They they need to have it where they can touch it and have it, because if it's on like your phone or your computer, you can't, you don't want to get it messy, that type of thing.
Right. That is crazy. So JoAnn, how do we get started decluttering and organizing without overwhelming ourselves? Because I think that sometimes, to me, when I start thinking about doing some of that, I'm like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. So decluttering should always come before organizing, because organizing is really about systems, and systems should be the very last thing that you ever do. And that's like standard. And most organizers will tell you that. The thing I always go a step further is, when you're decluttering, don't think about the systems. Don't even think, because a lot of times we'll have like, I don't know, say we have, a book, and we're thinking, oh, well, I got to go through these books, but where am I going to go put those books? So we're stopping ourselves. We need to get rid of as much as we can. And I'm not saying anybody needs to be a minimalist, but you should be a minimalist on your level, which means you shouldn't have anything in your home or your office that you don't need or that you don't love. Those are really only the 2 criteria. The whole spark joy, Marie Kondo thing.
Yeah.
That works for somebody that works for some people, but other people are like, but my tax returns do not spark joy. There are some things that just don't spark joy. And yes, you could find a way to turn that around. You know how people say, well, I don't have to pay my bills, I get to pay my bills. It's a great concept, and it works for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody. So I always say you either need it. There are some things that you just absolutely need 100%, or you love it. And things that you would love would be more like memorabilia, decorations, things like that. But all of that stuff should be honored on some level, whether you're displaying it or you're you're revisiting it from time to time. If it's memorabilia, don't. Obviously, like photos and things like that usually get put away and tucked away and looked at, occasionally. But, if you have like a piece, I'm trying to example, maybe your grandmother had a vase that you loved, but it doesn't fit your decor. Maybe take a picture of it and let it go to somebody else who's actually going to display it. Because if it's sitting in a box somewhere, it's really not, it's just taking up space.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think I know for me, it's like um, I've got a ton of books, and of course,
Mm,
part of it is like, well, I like having books, even though I've started to do more with like Kindle, and
yeah.
so, but it's like I need a better bookcases, I think, to
Mm,
really get it better organized, and so I think that's where I've had a little bit of a struggle. But then it's like we're in a house that we might rebuild in a few years. So it's like I don't want to necessarily spend a lot of money
mhm.
on bookcases that may not
Right.
fit with the new house,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
But
So yeah, and so and I don't think I really answered where to start. I did answer where to start
yeah,
decluttering, but really, I like to tell people just do a little bit each day. Don't because oftentimes, like you say, you're like, I'm going to tackle my closet today. And
right.
then, halfway through, you have to stop. So now you've just got this bigger mess. So if you're like, I really need to get my closet organized, well, okay, I'm just going to do the top shelf right now. And then if you finish and you're like, oh, I have more time, I'm going to do the floor. And then, you just kind of work your way through sections of things, whether it's a room, a closet, maybe one drawer in a kitchen, one cabinet. Don't try to do it all at once, because what happens is people are like, well, I'm going to declutter, but then they start organizing at the same time.
Mm,
And when you can't organize, clutter. So if you've still got stuff that you're going to let go of, don't waste the time organizing. Just focus and get rid of stuff. Focus, get rid of stuff. And once you've done all of that, you'd be surprised. You get to the end, you're like, wow, I don't really have to do much organizing. I've got so much more space, or, now I just need to group things together and it'll be a lot easier.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I think sometimes I think that's where, uh, you know, I'm not saying causes arguments because it doesn't, but my wife and I, she's like, well, you need to move all this stuff, and it's kind of like, well, where am I going to put it, right? So then I get
Mm-hmm.
into that.
Yep.
Yeah, I know we need to get organized, but it's like I have to figure out because some of these things when you get rid of, right, you got to be concerned because maybe it's got personal information,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I've really gotten into probably sounds like a disease, but I like to shred things, right? I
Yeah.
shred any
It's
paper.
cathartic.
I shred it because I
Yeah.
don't want anyone. If somebody wants to go into a dumpster and try to tape all that stuff back together, more power to them. But yeah, especially when it comes to like papers and anything like that, it's like I feel like you need to shred it first, and of course, then that takes up more space than if you had just thrown it out as is. So
Yeah.
it seems like a process. So I like that idea of like just do like maybe do a little bit every day, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually you get to where you have
Yeah.
that space to start organizing. What about
Yeah.
you, Tim? How do you declutter, or do you struggle as well with
Yeah.
that?
So I like what you were saying, JoAnn, about focus and organize, because we have two girls who are 8 and 11. So we have, like
Mhm.
the whole going through clothes thing, toys, like, as they reach different ages, like
Mhm.
what do we do with the things? Go to Salvation Army or pass it on to family? Or so we kind of go through these stages of we're I would say we're probably not consistent in, doing this all the time, but like the end of the school year, there's this huge, go through of everything, and um, some stuff goes to Salvation Army, some stuff gets passed along to other family members, but um, I'm thinking we could probably be better in more so throughout the year, and we do it other times during the year also, um, with with going through everything and organizing, decluttering, especially.
Mhm. Yeah, the important thing, I always tell people is it is such a struggle from when they're babies through, say, high school, because there is so
Yeah.
much that they bring in. Again, I'll go back to when we were in school, we didn't bring home papers like, tests and things like that. It really didn't come home, a lot of it. But there's so much, but, just know that that's going to stop at some point, so it's not going to be a lifelong thing, and it will get better. That I remember the moment of finally getting rid of like those last toys, and I was like, oh my god, it just feels so much better. But it's just a season of time. And addressing this as far as businesses go, um, it's the same concept. Most business owners that I work with, their number one struggle is digital files, especially people if they're
Mhm.
doing, social media marketing, or, anything to do with graphics and all of that. They have a lot of digital files and they're a mess. So chip away at those as well. And just don't think about organizing them. Think about, getting rid of. But you also want to think about the new stuff coming in. You want to kind of set that stuff aside because that's a big thing for people. They're like, well, I'm getting rid of all this stuff, but it just keeps coming in. So try to reduce that inflow as much as you can.
Wow.
In any aspect of life, but yeah.
Right. And I guess we'll get into it in the next question because you definitely sparked a spark there. But before we do that, we're going to have a special short video from our friends over at StreamYard.
And we are back. We're back here on the Tim and Jim Show with JoAnn Krall, and we're talking all about decluttering and organizing for less stress and more profit. So let us know if you have any questions for JoAnn. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer them for you. But Jim, where do we go from here?
Well, Tim, she kind of hit on something. Why don't you ask her this question?
Sure. So JoAnn, what tools do you recommend for getting organized?
None. No. It's funny. People ask me this all the time. I'm big on repurposing. So I'll start there. Jim, you talked about bookshelves. We often have bookshelves in our house that, can be moved and used in different ways. But I bet most people, and I've seen it, obviously, when I haven't worked with people in person for about 6 years, but for 10 years, I worked with people in person, and they had so many organizing tools that were just cluttering up their space. They weren't using them because it goes back to that. They're like, ooh, this is going to get me organized. And then they try it and it doesn't work. So repurposing things that you have, say I'll use like a magazine rack or a magazine holder, if you had that, but you're not organizing magazines or papers anymore, maybe it can go in a kitchen cabinet, those types of things. There are certain things, I'm like the one thing that I'm often recommending to people, and this goes for home or business, is over the door shoe racks. And more specifically, putting them so that they're inside a closet door so that they can't be seen. But they are a great place to store small items if you have a small space. And then, if we're talking like digital things for businesses, I think everybody should have a project management software. I don't recommend one specific one because everybody works differently, but having some sort of a place to hold your projects, and you don't have to have a team. It can just be you. It's really helpful if you have it while it's just you, because then when you do have a team, everything's kind of laid out. And the things that you should lay out in there, and your like standard operating procedures, your general to-do stuff, whatever's going on. And then alongside that, someplace like a note-keeping place, whether you use a Evernote or a OneNote, or there's a bunch of free apps out there, a place to kind of store your digital, things you're collecting. Because we all do like the bookmarks, and then we might save something on Facebook. We never go back and look at that stuff. So having one place to accumulate all the kind of the information, and that could be within your project management, or you could use an Evernote for project management. They all flow. And then definitely a digital calendar. I fought the digital calendar for a very long time because I'm very much paper, until I realized that I could still do both. So I have a paper calendar, and I have multiple digital calendars because, booking calendar and scheduling. And like Google Calendar, but having a digital calendar, because now that we all have phones with us, it's priceless for when you make a dentist appointment, you put it right in. And then if someone says, a client says, can we meet? And you go, nope, I got a dentist, that type of thing. So those are like, overall, those are definitely key. But I don't recommend like any specific like tool, unless somebody has a certain situation, then I can say, okay, this will work for you, but there's so much to it.
Right. Yeah, because I know, I mean, I think in some aspects, Trello, I think, is considered a project management system, but then you'll
Yeah.
hear like, about ClickUp and Asana and all that.
Yeah.
And I think even that for me sometimes is overwhelming because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, am I going to use it just because I have it?
Right.
And then I think, well, what do you think though, as far as with digital files, do you think it's good to maybe have the stuff backed up on a cloud somewhere? So if something happens with your
Mm.
local computer, is that something like a redundancy at least for your files? You think that's
I
a good idea?
absolutely, yes. So I recommend that people have an external hard drive, like a separate hard drive for anything that's really sensitive you don't want on the cloud. That may be like tax returns, things like that, unless you have a really safe backup.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't put it on Google Drive or even I don't know how safe Dropbox is. I haven't really used Dropbox in years, but yes, definitely, I recommend having backups. This is where people get really tripped up though, because a lot of people do have backups, and they'll say, "Well, I have Google Photos, and then those photos are backed up in Dropbox, and then they're on a hard drive, and they're like, I don't know what photos are where and how." And I always say, "Don't worry about it." That's where we get back to decluttering. You're just going to go and declutter Google Photos. Doesn't matter if there are other places, because when you get to those other places, you'll declutter those, and it's definitely something that you just have to chip away at. So yeah, I recommend. I actually don't back up my files to the cloud anymore. I do use Google Drive for certain files, but nothing that's on my computer gets backed up to the cloud, only because I prefer a system I used to use a system called Mosey. I don't even know if they're still around.
Mm.
But like a Carbonite or something,
Right.
because those are true backups and restores. That you get less redundancy, because you're just taking a full backup, putting it there, and then it's kind of a constant thing. But yeah, you can do that with Dropbox, and you can back that stuff up if it's stuff that you're not worried about anybody seeing. I think that's definitely a great idea.
Yeah, that's some great points. It's funny that you talk about photos because every once in a while when I'm going through my iPhone and wanting to post a photo as part of like, say, a Twitter chat, I'm like, I really need to organize my photos because like scanning and, like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that picture was 3 years ago and I
Yeah.
got all these other pictures that I should delete. So I guess step one would be delete the photos I don't need and
Mhm.
then organize.
Yes. I apply that to every aspect of life, whether it's your to-do list or it's your photos or it's your kitchen, anything. It's always about reducing, reducing, reducing. I just want to go back to when you were talking about Trello and Asana and will you use it? Um, I used to use Asana for business and Trello for personal. And I never opened either one of them. So I had them. They were beautiful. I never opened them. I don't know why. I just didn't. I started using ClickUp. I open it every day and it
Mm.
works for me. So sometimes it's just about a feeling of the way something works. For some reason, ClickUp clicks with my brain. Does
Mm.
not click with everybody's brain because it can be very, people like, no, I don't even want to look at that. And that's totally fine. So yeah. And then I
And
have other people that love Trello.
yeah, and so you talked about this a little bit too, and I know like from a psychological standpoint, there's this talk of writing stuff down versus typing it, if you want to call it, or using your
Mhm.
voice to record something digitally. What are your thoughts there as far as from an organization standpoint?
Yeah. I think if you're the type of person that thrives from writing things down, I know I'll go to a conference and I'll see people typing away and I'm like, are you even listening? You're just sitting there typing. And then I see the people writing furiously. And again, I'm like, are you even listening? So and I'm just the like key point, write a quick note type of thing, but try to listen. But yeah, for me personally, and I know a lot of my clients, the act of writing something down makes it stick in the brain more. And so I like to write everything down and then I will then process it and say, okay, now what needs to go into ClickUp? Because then I will put it digitally. But I'm not putting everything I've written down in there. I'm only putting what needs to go in there. So it's kind of like I do a brain dump and then I process it through there. And So, and then like my husband's an actual project manager. He actually does project management. And so for him, he wanted so desperately to have digital notes. And I'm like, okay, so back before the Remarkable existed, so I actually say I would recommend that. And I'll talk about that in a second. He used the Rocketbook. I don't know if you've heard of Rocketbook,
I
right?
had a Rocketbook.
And so that worked really well for him because he needs to write during a meeting, and then he could scan it and he'd have his notes and he wouldn't have all these papers everywhere. That worked really well for him. And then when the Remarkable, have you seen that? The Remarkable
I
notepad?
know. I want to say Cami Hoysa uses that and talks about it all the time.
I said, you know what? I'll buy it for you for research, right? Because I need to know if this is going to work for my clients. And he loves that. That's even better because it truly feels like writing on paper, but he doesn't have to do any of the upload. It's just there. It's all there for him when he does it, and you can organize it. There's also, you can also, if you have an iPad, a later version iPad, you can get a sheet that goes over it that will feel like papers too, as well. We'll do a very similar thing. So that can be really helpful for people who like to write, but they need it digital. But for me, sometimes I will have a note and I'll be like, all right, this isn't something that this is just something I want to keep for a certain amount. I scan it and put it into Evernote because Evernote is wonderful for being able to, I got to search this term and that piece of paper will come up, and as long as your handwriting's not horrendous, so that's what I do. So I don't keep a lot of paper. I write all my stuff down and then I transfer it, I type it in what I need to do. And then if I have something that I'm like, well, I took notes from a webinar that I watched and I just want to keep it, but I don't want to type it anywhere, I'll just scan it and put it into Evernote.
Right. Wow. So
I never look at it again.
What is this sheet you talk about? Because I do have an iPad and I didn't know that.
I'm not sure what exactly it's called, but if you just, it's just like it's like an overlay. It's just like it's like I don't know if it's plastic or what it is, but you just overlay it over and you can use the Apple Pencil and you can just write. So it's like, you can write on your iPad, but it doesn't feel like writing on paper. There's an actual sheet. I think if you just Google it, you put it on, it'll feel more like you're writing on paper.
Interesting. I might have to check that out.
Yeah. Tim, I haven't tried it, so I don't know how good it is.
Tim, are you a writer or a digital person? Because I know you were a editor for a long time. So
yeah, so I'm both. I'll write a list down in the morning of all the things I need to get done in priority order, and then I'll put it in notes, or I usually use the Notes app. And that's what I do.
That's good.
Simple.
Yeah, the notes that I like for the Apple Notes has come a long way. They're trying to keep up, which is good. So that, and like I say, know any of these things. Like if somebody, because people are always saying, oh, this great new app and this great new app, and people are grabbing them. You just try it. If it doesn't feel right away, you'll know. Just get rid of it. Go move on to the next one and see what works.
Right. So JoAnn, we got one more question for you, and that is, how can getting organized and decluttering really help reduce the stress and make us more profitable?
Okay. So as far as reducing stress, you just, the less stuff you have around will automatically reduce your stress. Most people stress that, like I said, some people feel comfort from it. But, because we don't often realize how much clutter affects us. We can see it it's in our subconscious, it's in our peripheral, it's always there. Where, even if we walk into a room and we're like, we know there's a pile over there, but we're not thinking, oh, I got to get to that pile. It's there and we know. So just freeing up our physical space reduces stress. Freeing up our digital space really reduces stress. I don't know how many people open up their laptop and the desktop is covered in icons. That can be really, when you open up and you see an organized, it's a really nice way to start the day, knowing that you can find everything when you need it. It doesn't have to be neat, but knowing you can find everything. And then, getting out the door. If you're somebody that has to get ready and get out the door, if you're organized, you're going to be less stressed. You're not going to be rushing, reducing the amount of stuff on your calendar, having less to do, or just, focusing on the important things. So that's the stress part. And then profitable, I look at two ways. If you're a business owner and you're organized, you're going to be able to more easily market, or at least, if you have somebody else doing your marketing or other stuff, things are just going to flow better. So you're going to get your stuff out there faster. If you're a coach or a consultant or somebody who does work for others, you're going to look more professional. You can charge more money. And then the other side of profitable for me is saving money. You're not going to be wasting. We talked about this earlier. I went through all my subscriptions of what I use for my business, and it's like, well, I'm not using this. Why am I using this? So, for my business or for personal, going through your subscriptions and being organized about your bills, not paying late fees, or if you're invoicing your clients on time, you're gonna get your money in faster. The quicker the money comes to you, the more profitable you're going to be. So those are just some ways.
Right. And so, folks, if you want to connect with JoAnn, I've got her Instagram and Twitter handles here. It's the same. It's at JoAnn Krall. And JoAnn, you've actually got a webinar going on.
Yes.
I believe it's tomorrow. Yes.
Tomorrow.
Tell us about that.
So that is the 4 common reasons you're disorganized and what to do about it. We talked a little bit about that today. So I'm going to go into more depth on that, and then leave a good amount of time for questions and answers, because I don't believe in cookie cutter solutions. So I could say something and somebody may say, oh, well, what about that? Doesn't really apply to me. How could I apply that to me? So
I think that's actually a great point. I'm glad to hear that, because I think you're right. I think, we all are a little different, and what works for Tim may not work for me, and vice versa. That's really good to know. Yeah, because I think I might have to check out the ClickUp, because I used Trello, but it was more as a way with a business partner for us to both have access to some list and processes. I do use Evernote, but
good,
because it's really a great great tool for me. I've used that for quite a while. Tim, you use any tools that you find help you a lot with organization?
Like I said before, I use the Notes app. I use Google Drive a lot, like Google Docs, all the Google things.
All the Googles.
Yeah, all the Googles.
And I love that. That's simplicity is, it's good. I mean, it really helps. And Jim, you must know Yvonne Hyman, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you're going to use ClickUp, you got to follow her step by step, because she gives you from the basics on. And that really, really helps, because I got ClickUp a year before I met her. I did nothing with it.
Right.
Then I met her and I watched a little, and I was like, oh, now I get it. So it's just because ClickUp is a blank slate.
Right.
It's not, and that can be really overwhelming. And if you don't set it up the way you want it set up at the beginning, it can just make you go, forget it. I'm not going to use it. So.
Yeah.
But I run my whole life in ClickUp, personal, business, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. We started, I started really at the beginning of the pandemic, started using Google Calendar with Calendly, religiously. That's how, we booked the show and things like that. Because one, like you said, when you start putting all your appointments in your digital calendar, it prevents you from double booking, right? Because that's the worst thing, when you're like, I just booked something and I forgot that I had this.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and it was funny because my wife was on Yahoo Mail before, which is a whole nother story. I got her to get a Gmail account
for other stuff.
Yeah, so that we're able to share the calendar, and she can put when she's got something, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So now we can see oh, do you have something? Of course, sometimes I'll forget to put something on there, and she's like, well, you didn't put it on the calendar. I was like, you're right.
Oops.
So it's still a little bit of a work in progress of putting everything on there. But I definitely think that that's a great point. And we still have, like you said, we have calendars that we hang on the wall where we'll write little things. But for the most part, I think I'm the digital calendar most of the time. But I also have Dr. I put together this great goal setting organizer that I've been a part of that, and plan to renew that as well. And that's writing things down, because I think it is important to write your goals down. Which is a little different than organizing, but I guess the big thing. So what are the big things that are coming up for you and your business here in the next few months? Anything
so I'm coming up on a year anniversary of launching my membership. And so I've been working with people for a year, like refining how the process and how I want it to be laid out. And so I'm actually, the reason why I'm running the webinar is because I'm closing the doors to that webinar. It's getting late. It's getting early. I need more coffee. Closing the doors to the membership on November 15th for a brief period until the end of the year, because everybody wants to get organized in January. So I'm giving myself a month and a half to kind of just make sure I have all my messaging intact. But yeah, so I'm excited because that it's November 15th. It'll still be in beta pricing, and then end of the year it'll be out of beta pricing. So it took me a year to do that, but it's okay. We wanted to make sure it was in a good space.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And Tim, what about you? First of all, congratulations. For those of you that don't know, Tim just held his first in-person event for Perspectives on Cancer this past Saturday. And from what I hear, and I got to watch the one party live stream, everything sounded like it went great, Tim.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, it was a really great event. Great to meet a number of people that I've been connected to on LinkedIn and who show up for the Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer show every week. Got to meet them in person for the first time. And we also had the 52nd episode of the show with a live audience as well as live stream. So it was really awesome to be able to celebrate in person together. So yeah. What about Jim? Do you have anything coming up?
Well, actually, next week, tomorrow is the Marine Corps birthday. So I'll be celebrating that, and then Friday being Veterans Day as well. And I'm supposed to maybe do a 5K Saturday, but I'm going to tell you it's going to depend on the weather, because if it's cold and rainy, I'm not doing it. I'm just going to be honest. I don't feel like being miserable on a Saturday morning. And but yeah, next week, Chris and I are going to be interviewing Mario Ponce from Shure over on Dealcasters Wednesday afternoon, and we'll be talking about microphones like this Shure MV7X that I'm using here. So excited about that. And yeah, it's just hard to believe that the holidays are just around the corner. I wish people would let us get through Thanksgiving before we start throwing out all the Christmas stuff. But that's just me. I can't speak for everyone else.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, this has been great, JoAnn. You've given us some great tips. And folks, we've shared the link to sign up for her webinar in the description of all the shows. So make sure you check it out. I know I've signed up, because I think you said you would have a recording if we can't. Yeah. So I'm probably going to watch. Well, not probably. I'm going to watch the recording, because I think
most people do. I'll be talking to myself, but that's okay. No, there'll be a handful usually of people that show up live. Picking the time is always a challenge, but I have to do what works for me.
And we got kind of a funny from Gail. She's like, "Ugh, the holidays. Now I need to organize my Christmas stuff."
This is the time to do it, because then when you put it all away at the end of the season, you'll know that next year it'll be all good.
Right.
I have a blog on that, all about holiday organization. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. All the cards start showing up in the mail, which is a whole nother thing. Well, next week we are going to have Charvette Mitchell on. She's going to talk about branding for your business. And so excited to have her on, and connected with her through StreamYard has a new tool called Collab, which is a place where you can sign up, and if you want to be a guest on people's shows, or if you have a show and are looking for guests. So it's kind of, I think, their own version of like a pod match, but for live streamers. So I thought that's neat that they've launched that, and I've gotten early access. So if you're interested in getting access to that, let me know. I can shoot you the email. I don't know if you have to have a StreamYard paid account. Well, I don't think you do. I think anyone can sign up for it. But yeah, I'll definitely send you one. Then I saw your hand go up. So I'll send that to you. And that's how I learned about Charvette. And so, yeah, this has been great. Now, make sure you go follow JoAnn. JoAnn, are you still staying on Twitter with all this crazy stuff?
Yeah, I'm in my own little Twitter land of just people I like. So I haven't until if it gets ugly, maybe not. But I haven't seen anything. So yeah. I like Twitter. I don't know. It's nice for just oh, thank you, Gail. Look
There
forward
you
to
go.
seeing you there. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to say which my favorite platform was always Snapchat. And Snapchat,
Oh,
I still love it to communicate with friends, but
wow.
yeah, now I
That's
don't really have a favorite. I'm everywhere though. Probably
yeah.
Pinterest for me. Pinterest is and it's not really a social platform, but it's
But they've made a lot of changes, and
yes.
that's one that I keep saying that I want to learn more about because it's
Mm,
got some benefits because
it's a
they're
long
starting to do
game.
more with video and
Yeah.
even it's good, really good with SEO from what I hear.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
our friend Jeff C is a big
Yeah.
big Pinterest, the manly Pinterest guy at
The
that.
manly Pinterest guy. Yep.
Yeah. And so, but folks, thanks again. We will see you all next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, as they would say on Batman. Tim, any final thoughts?
Just thank you, JoAnn. This has been a great show, and
Thank you.
appreciate your time and all the great information you've shared with us today.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.